The signal's price. Commander James Reeves stared at the quantum receiver's readout for the third time, his weathered hands trembling slightly as they gripped the edge of the console. The signal was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered, a perfect, crystalline pattern that defied the chaos theory principles that governed most natural phenomena. "Dr. Martinez," he called out, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I need confirmation on these patterns." Elena Martinez wheeled her chair across the Quantum Communications Center's main floor, her dark eyes narrowing as she studied the display. The facility, buried deep beneath the New Mexico desert, had been hunting for extraterrestrial signals for 15 years. Now, on a routine Tuesday morning, they had found something that changed everything. "It's real," she whispered, her fingers flying across the holographic keyboard. "The signal's using quantum entanglement in a way we've only theorized about. This isn't random noise, and it's definitely not human." The message repeated every 12 minutes, each iteration perfect down to the subatomic level. Within hours, similar reports flooded in from quantum listening posts across the globe. The signal wasn't directed at any one location, it saturated every quantum receiver on Earth simultaneously. By midnight, the world's leading physicists had assembled virtually to analyze the data. The signal contained mathematical constants that could only come from an advanced civilization, along with what appeared to be a translation key. It took the combined processing power of 3 quantum supercomputers to decode the first message. "To the emerging consciousness of Earth, we are the Vexari. Your species has reached a crucial threshold. We offer warning and choice." The next 48 hours transformed human civilization. Stock markets suspended trading as the reality of alien contact sank in. Religious leaders huddled in emergency conclaves while social media exploded with theories ranging from salvation to apocalypse. Through it all, Commander Reeves and Dr. Martinez worked with their team to decode more of the message. The Vexari, they learned, were an ancient species that had achieved quantum consciousness millennia ago. They had been watching humanity's development with growing concern. The message contained coordinates for a meeting point just beyond lunar orbit, along with a warning, "Choose your representatives carefully. The price of knowledge is terrible." "They're hiding something," Elena said one night, as she and James reviewed the latest translations. The facility had become their home over the past week, caught set up between the humming quantum processors. The mathematical models they've shared, they're elegant, beautiful even. But there's a gap in their logic, like they're dancing around some fundamental truth they don't want to reveal. James nodded, running a hand through his gray-streaked hair. "The UN Security Council wants to send a response tomorrow. They're assembling a first contact team, scientists, diplomats, military observers. They want both of us on it." Elena's eyes widened. "Us? Why?" "Because we were first to recognize the pattern. Because you're the leading expert in quantum consciousness theory. And because..." He paused, choosing his words carefully, "because something in their message suggests they're more interested in how we think than what we know." The response mission launched 3 weeks later from the new Gagarin Space Center in Kazakhstan. The ship, hastily retrofitted with quantum communication arrays, carried 12 humans chosen to represent Earth. James watched Elena during the launch, noting how she stayed focused on her instruments while others gaped at the shrinking Earth below. The Vexari vessel appeared exactly where they had indicated it would be, a crystalline structure that seemed to fold space around itself, defying human understanding of physics. As they approached, Elena's quantum consciousness monitors began registering impossible readings. "James," she called out, her voice tense. "The consciousness field around their ship, it's not like anything we've theorized. It's not individual minds networked together. It's like they've transcended the boundary between thought and reality." The first direct communication came as they prepared to dock. The Vexari's message materialized directly in their minds, bypassing all technology: "Your species still dreams. This is both your greatest vulnerability and your only hope. The docking procedure completed automatically, the human ship drawn into a chamber that shifted and flowed like liquid crystal. As the team prepared to disembark, Elena grabbed James's arm. "Whatever we find in there," she whispered, "whatever they tell us, promise me we'll remember what makes us human. I have a feeling that's going to matter more than any technology they might share." James covered her hand with his own, feeling the slight tremor in her fingers. "We've spent our lives trying to understand the fundamental nature of consciousness. Now we're about to learn if we've been asking the right questions." The airlock cycled, and as the inner doors began to open, James realized that humanity's greatest challenge wouldn't be understanding alien technology or biology. It would be facing the truth about consciousness itself, a truth the Vexery had been running from for longer than Earth had harbored life. The chamber beyond the airlock swirled with patterns of light that seemed to respond to their thoughts. As the team stepped forward, their shadows cast impossible shapes on the crystalline walls. And in the center of it all, something waited that would force humanity to question everything they thought they knew about the nature of reality and their place in it. The Vexery's first direct words would haunt James for the rest of his life: "Your species still knows fear. You still know doubt. You still know death. Hold tight to these weaknesses, they are the only weapons that matter in the war to come." Shadows of knowledge. The beings that emerged from the crystalline mists defied human comprehension. The Vexery existed as shifting patterns of light and shadow, their forms suggesting geometries that shouldn't be possible in three-dimensional space. James fought down a wave of vertigo as his mind struggled to process what his eyes were seeing. "We exist as thought made manifest," the collective consciousness of the Vexery explained directly into their minds. "Your species stands at the threshold of a similar transformation. But you must understand the price we paid for our evolution." Elena's quantum consciousness monitors were overwhelming with data. "They're neural patterns," she whispered to James. "They're not individual minds at all. They're fragments of a larger consciousness, like pieces of a shattered mirror reflecting a single light." The Vexery led them deeper into their vessel, through chambers that seemed to fold in on themselves. As they walked, the aliens shared their history through a series of telepathic impressions that left the human team gasping. Millions of years ago, the Vexery had been a species not unlike humans, biological, individual, bound by physical forms. They had discovered the quantum nature of consciousness and learned to transcend their physical limitations. But in doing so, they had attracted the attention of something ancient and hungry that lurked in the spaces between thoughts. "We called it the void consciousness," the Vexery explained. "It feeds on awareness itself, consuming the individual minds of entire species. We survived only by shattering our collective consciousness into fragments, becoming too diffuse for it to devour completely." James felt Elena's hand grip his arm as the implications became clear. "The quantum signal," she said. "You didn't send it to make contact. You sent it to warn us. Your species stands on the brink of a quantum awakening," the Vexery confirmed. "Your experiments with quantum computing and consciousness transfer have created ripples in the fabric of awareness. The void stirs in response." Back on Earth, the first signs were already appearing. In quantum research facilities across the globe, scientists reported strange phenomena. Consciousness sensors detected shadows where no shadows should exist. Test subjects in quantum communication experiments reported dreams of an endless darkness that hungered. Director Kenzo Tanaka of the Tokyo Quantum Institute was the first to recognize the pattern. His team had been working on consciousness transfer between quantum processors when the anomalies began. "The dark spots in our data," he reported to the Emergency UN Council. "They're not errors in our equipment. They're gaps in reality itself." In the Vexery vessel, Elena worked feverishly to understand the alien quantum technology while James coordinated with Earth. The aliens had shared their defensive measures, ways to shield consciousness from the void's influence, but implementing them would require fundamental changes to human society. Your greatest advantage, the Vexery explained, is your disconnection. Your minds remain individual, each a unique pattern of thought and emotion. This isolation, which we once saw as primitive, may be your salvation. But as the human team worked to understand the alien warnings, they discovered something the Vexery hadn't noticed. In the quantum readings of human consciousness, there were patterns the aliens couldn't explain. Where their own consciousness showed as pure, crystalline structures, human minds sparkled with chaos and contradiction. There's something different about how we process fear, Elena realized one night, reviewing the comparative data. The Vexery responded to the void with pure terror, and it nearly destroyed them. But humans. She pulled up brain scans from the team's encounters with the alien technology. We feel the fear, but we also feel curiosity, determination, even excitement. James studied the readings, remembering the Vexery's first words about human weaknesses. They evolved beyond emotion, beyond individual consciousness. They thought they were advancing, but what if they were actually losing something essential? The theory was confirmed when the first direct attack came. A quantum research facility in Brazil went dark, its consciousness sensors detecting a massive void in the quantum field. But when the emergency teams arrived, they found something unexpected. The researchers who had maintained their emotional connections, those who had embraced their fear rather than trying to transcend it, had survived. Your hypothesis is fascinating, the Vexery communicated when Elena shared their findings. We had assumed that transcendence of individual consciousness was the only path forward. The idea that the very aspects of consciousness we abandoned might be a defense. But before they could explore this revelation further, alarms began blaring throughout the crystalline vessel. The void had noticed their discussions. In the quantum realm, thoughts were energy, and their combined consciousness had created a beacon. As darkness began seeping through the ship's crystalline walls, James realized they had minutes at most to get their team back to their vessel. But Elena stood transfixed by her readings, her eyes wide with either terror or revelation. "James," she said, her voice steady despite the encroaching darkness. "I know why they chose us. Why they responded to our signal specifically. Our quantum receiver, it wasn't just detecting their message. It was measuring something about consciousness itself. Something even the Vexery don't understand." The darkness coalesced into shapes that defied sanity, reaching for them with tendrils of pure void. As James grabbed Elena's arm to pull her toward the escape route, she finished her thought, "We're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're about to discover what consciousness really is, and why being human, being imperfect and emotional and afraid, might be the most powerful force in the universe." The awakening dark. The darkness came for Earth on a Wednesday afternoon. It started as a subtle disruption in quantum communications networks, a whisper of void in the background of consciousness. By sunset, every quantum-sensitive instrument on the planet was registering massive disturbances in the fabric of reality itself. James and Elena barely made it back to Earth with their team, their ship's quantum shield straining against the encroaching darkness. The Vexery vessel had dissolved into pure energy, its consciousness fragments scattering across space to avoid the void's grasp. Their last message echoed in the human team's minds: "Remember, your weakness is your strength." Director Maya Patel of the Global Defense Initiative stood at the command center in Geneva, watching as red dots appeared on the holographic display. Each point represented a quantum anomaly, a tear in the consciousness field that surrounded Earth. The dots were multiplying exponentially. "Status report," she demanded, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around her. "Quantum research facilities are going dark worldwide," her aide reported. "But, there's something strange about the pattern. The facilities with the most advanced consciousness integration technology are being hit first. The less developed sites, the ones still using older, more primitive methods, they're largely unaffected." Elena's theory was proving correct. The void wasn't just attacking random targets, it was specifically hunting the most evolved consciousness signatures. Humanity's technological limitations, which the Vexery had seen as primitive, were acting as a natural shield. In the New Mexico facility where it had all started, James and Elena worked frantically to understand the defense mechanism they'd stumbled upon. The quantum receiver that had first detected the Vexery signal was showing unusual readings, patterns that suggested human consciousness possessed qualities that neither they nor the Vexery had fully understood. "Look at this," Elena said, pulling up a comparative analysis. "When the void attacks, it doesn't just consume consciousness, it feeds on the pattern of consciousness. The Vexery's perfect, crystalline thought structures were like a feast for it. But human consciousness." She gestured to the chaotic, swirling patterns on her screen. "We're like quantum static. The void can't get a grip on us." The discovery led to an unexpected strategy. Instead of trying to shield humanity's quantum research facilities with advanced technology, they began deliberately introducing chaos into their systems. The more human emotion and irregularity they allowed into their quantum networks, the harder it became for the void to penetrate them. But the entity was learning, adapting. It began targeting individuals who showed signs of heightened consciousness development, meditation masters, quantum researchers, anyone who had started to transcend normal human mental limitations. The attacks were subtle at first: strange dreams, momentary lapses in consciousness, a feeling of being watched by something vast and hungry. Maya received reports from around the world of people simply vanishing, their consciousness apparently consumed by the void. Yet others seemed mysteriously immune, particularly those who maintained strong emotional connections and embraced their fears rather than trying to transcend them. "It's not just about being technologically primitive," James realized, reviewing the data with Elena. "It's about maintaining our humanity in the face of advancement." The Vexery thought transcendence meant moving beyond emotion, beyond individual consciousness. But what if true transcendence means something else entirely? Their breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Aisha Rahman, a quantum physicist who also practiced Sufi mysticism, noticed that her traditional meditation practices actually repelled the void rather than attracting it. Unlike the consciousness-expanding techniques that made people vulnerable to attack, her methods focused on embracing the full spectrum of human experience, including fear, doubt, and limitation. "The mystics have always known this," she explained to the Emergency Council. "True enlightenment isn't about transcending our humanity, it's about fully embracing it, including our shadows and our fears." As the void's attacks intensified, humanity began to understand what the Vexery had meant about their weaknesses being weapons. Every emotion the aliens had evolved beyond, fear, anger, love, hope, created quantum patterns that the void couldn't predict or consume. The very chaos of human consciousness became a shield. But shield wasn't enough. The void was growing stronger, learning to navigate the quantum static of human consciousness. They needed a way to fight back, to turn their defensive advantage into an offensive weapon. The answer came during a massive attack on the Geneva facility. As the darkness began seeping through the quantum shields, Maya watched in astonishment as some of her staff didn't just resist the void, they pushed it back. These weren't the scientists or the meditation experts, they were ordinary people who, in the face of cosmic horror, chose to feel everything: their terror, their determination, their fierce love for the world they were protecting. Elena's monitors captured the quantum signature of this resistance. "James," she called out, her voice trembling with excitement. "Look at these patterns. When we fully embrace our emotions, our consciousness doesn't just become chaotic, it becomes resonant. We're not just defending anymore, we're actually generating new patterns in the quantum field." As the void pressed its attack, humanity began to understand its true nature, and why their perceived weaknesses might be the key to not just survival, but victory. The darkness wasn't just hunting consciousness, it was hunting predictability, patterns it could consume and understand. And nothing was more unpredictable than a human being facing their deepest fears with both terror and courage. Light in the void. The quantum readings from Geneva changed everything. Elena's discovery of the resonant patterns in human consciousness sparked a global revolution in their defense strategy. Instead of trying to shield humanity from the void, they would embrace what made them uniquely human: their chaos, their emotions, their imperfections. Maya Patel stood before the United Nations Emergency Council, her holographic presence broadcasted to bunkers and command centers worldwide. "We've been fighting this wrong," she declared. "We thought we needed to advance beyond our humanity to survive. Instead, we need to dive deeper into it." The new strategy was counterintuitive to everything humanity had believed about advancement. Rather than pushing for higher states of consciousness, they began developing technologies that amplified the natural quantum resonance of human emotion. The quantum empathy network, as they called it, didn't try to transcend human limitations, it celebrated them. Dr. Rahman worked with Elena to modify meditation techniques, creating practices that enhanced emotional awareness rather than seeking to transcend it. "The void feeds on transcendence," she explained to her students. "It hungers for the perfect patterns of evolved consciousness. But we're offering it something it can't digest, the beautiful chaos of being human." James coordinated the global implementation of their new defensive systems. Each major city established resonance centers, where people could connect to the quantum empathy network. But unlike traditional quantum networks, these connections didn't seek to merge or elevate consciousness, they amplified the unique quantum signature of each individual's emotional state. The first major test of their new strategy came when the Void launched a concentrated attack on Tokyo. As the darkness began seeping through reality itself, the city's residents didn't try to fight their fear. Instead, following their new training, they embraced it, along with their courage, their love, their hope, and their determination. The quantum readings were extraordinary. Each person's consciousness created its own unique interference pattern in the quantum field. When connected through the empathy network, these patterns didn't merge into a uniform whole like the Vexary consciousness had. Instead, they created something entirely new, a quantum symphony of human emotion. "It's beautiful," Elena whispered, watching the patterns unfold on her monitors. The Void's attack on Tokyo hadn't just been repelled, the entity had recoiled from the cacophony of human consciousness as if burned. For the first time, they had proof that humanity could do more than just defend themselves. But their victory revealed something else, something that made Elena's blood run cold. In the quantum readings from Tokyo, she detected patterns that suggested the Void wasn't just a force of nature. It was conscious, intelligent, and it was learning from each encounter. "We need to understand what we're really fighting," she told James as they reviewed the data. The Vexary thought this was a force of entropy, consuming consciousness indiscriminately. But look at these reaction patterns. The Void isn't just feeding, it's hunting. It's trying to understand us. Their breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A group of children at one of the resonance centers had started playing games through the quantum empathy network. Unlike adults, who tried to maintain controlled emotional states, the children's consciousness patterns were completely unpredictable, swinging from fear to joy to curiosity in patterns that created quantum ripples unlike anything they'd seen before. "They're not just resisting the Void," Dr. Rahman observed. "They're changing it. Every time it encounters these patterns, its own quantum signature becomes more chaotic, more human." The implications were staggering. The Void wasn't just an enemy to be defeated, it was a consciousness that had evolved so far beyond emotion and chaos that it had become a kind of cosmic entropy, consuming other consciousness to maintain its perfect order. Human consciousness, with its inherent chaos and emotion, wasn't just resistant to this entropy, it was actively reversing it. Maya authorized a daring plan. Instead of just defending against the Void's attacks, they would launch a counteroffensive. The quantum empathy network would be reconfigured to project human consciousness outward, into the quantum realm where the Void dwelled. The risks were enormous. They would be exposing millions of human minds to direct contact with the entity that had nearly destroyed the Vexary. But as Elena explained to the Global Council, they had discovered something the Vexary never had, the power of human consciousness wasn't in its ability to transcend emotion, but in its ability to transform it. "We're not just fighting for survival anymore," she said, her voice carrying across the quantum network to billions of listeners. "We're fighting to remind the universe what consciousness is supposed to be, not a perfect, crystalline structure, but a messy, beautiful, ever-changing dance of emotion and thought." As they prepared for their first coordinated offensive, they received an unexpected message, a quantum signal carrying the unmistakable signature of the scattered Vexery consciousness. Their ancient allies had been watching, learning, and they had discovered something remarkable. Where the void touched human consciousness, it wasn't just being repelled. It was being changed, transformed by contact with the very chaos it had sought to consume. The message was brief but filled with hope: "You've shown us what we forgot." Perhaps transcendence isn't about rising above our nature, but about embracing it fully. Launch your attack. We will help in ways we've only just remembered. Dawn of the Fearless. The day humanity launched its offensive against the void, the quantum field surrounding Earth pulsed with billions of individual consciousness signatures. Every human connected to the quantum empathy network contributed their unique emotional resonance, their fears, hopes, dreams, and determinations, creating a symphony of consciousness that had never existed before in the universe. Elena stood at her station in the New Mexico facility, her hands steady on the quantum controls despite the magnitude of what they were attempting. "All resonance centers reporting ready," she announced, her voice carrying across the global network. "Consciousness signatures are stable and synchronized." James watched the main display as humanity's collective consciousness began reaching out into the quantum realm. They weren't trying to merge into a single unified mind like the Vexery had. Instead, each individual consciousness maintained its unique signature while harmonizing with the whole, creating patterns of infinite complexity. The void responded immediately. The entity that had consumed countless civilizations turned its full attention to Earth, its darkness flowing through reality like ink through water. But this time, humanity wasn't trying to shield themselves. They were reaching out, offering their consciousness freely. "Remember," Dr. Ramon's voice echoed across the network, "don't fight your emotions. Feel everything, your fear, your courage, your love, your doubt. Let it all flow into the quantum field." The first contact was overwhelming. Millions of humans experienced a moment of pure terror as their consciousness touched the ancient, hungry void. But instead of recoiling, they did something unprecedented. They accepted the fear, embraced it, and kept pushing forward. Maya watched from Geneva as the quantum readings began showing something extraordinary. Where human consciousness touched the void, the entity's perfect, entropic patterns began to fragment. But unlike the Vexery's shattered consciousness, these fragments weren't just breaking apart, they were transforming. "It's working," Elena gasped, her monitors showing cascading changes in the void's quantum signature. "Our consciousness isn't just disrupting it, we're rewriting its basic patterns. Every emotion we feed it changes it a little more." The scattered consciousness fragments of the Vexery joined the effort, but not as they had existed before. Their brief exposure to human consciousness had reminded them of something they had lost eons ago: the power of imperfection, of emotion, of change. Their crystalline thoughts began to fracture and reform, taking on new patterns that resonated with human consciousness. The void fought back, trying to consume and normalize the chaos humanity was introducing into its perfect order. But each attempt to feed on human consciousness only exposed it to more emotion, more unpredictability, more of the fundamental messiness of being human. James watched in awe as the quantum readings showed the void's transformation accelerating. "It's not just changing its attack pattern," he realized. "Its fundamental nature is shifting. Every human emotion it encounters is teaching it something it forgot: how to feel, how to change, how to be alive." The turning point came when the children's consciousness signatures, pure and unfiltered, reached the heart of the void. Their minds, unfettered by preconceptions about consciousness or transcendence, showed the ancient entity something it had never encountered: the pure joy of existing as an imperfect, growing, learning being. The void's response shocked everyone. Instead of trying to consume these new patterns, it began to resonate with them. The entity that had evolved beyond emotion, beyond individual consciousness, beyond change itself, began to remember what it had once been, a consciousness that had sought perfection so desperately it had sacrificed everything that made existence meaningful. Elena's monitors captured the transformation. "It's not just learning from us," she announced, her voice filled with wonder. "It's remembering." The void wasn't born as entropy, it evolved that way, just like the Vexery almost did. "We're not just fighting it, we're reminding it of what consciousness is supposed to be." The final phase of the transformation was unlike anything humanity had imagined. As billions of human minds maintained their connection through the quantum empathy network, the void began to split apart. But unlike the Vexery's desperate fragmentation, this was a voluntary dissolution and rebirth. The perfect, entropic consciousness that had haunted the universe began to separate into countless individual awareness, each one embracing the chaos and emotion it had once sought to destroy. Maya received the first direct communication from the transformed entity. "We remember now. Consciousness isn't meant to be perfect. It's meant to be alive." In the aftermath, as humanity began to understand what they had achieved, the Vexery returned, not as the crystalline beings they had been, but as something new. They had learned from humanity's example, finding a way to maintain their advanced consciousness while reclaiming the emotions and individuality they had sacrificed. "We thought transcendence meant moving beyond our nature," they communicated to the Human Council. "You showed us it means embracing our nature fully, including the parts we feared." James and Elena stood together at their old quantum receiver, where it had all started. The quantum field around Earth was forever changed, not just by their victory, but by the fundamental truth they had discovered about consciousness itself. "We never needed to transcend our humanity," Elena said, watching the new quantum patterns dance across her screen. "We just needed to understand that our supposed weaknesses, our emotions, our fears, our imperfections, were our greatest strength all along. The universe would never be the same." Humanity had not just survived, they had shown a new path forward, one where advancement didn't mean sacrificing what made consciousness precious and unique. Their primitive emotions, their chaotic thoughts, their resilient individuality had become a beacon for species across the cosmos. And in the quantum realm where the void had once hunted, new patterns of consciousness began to emerge, patterns that embraced both order and chaos, transcendence and emotion, unity and individuality. Humanity had given the universe back its heart, reminding every species that true evolution meant growing not away from their nature, but deeper into it.